Welcome to the Rehumanization Station. I'm your collaborator, Christopher Jones, aka Dr. X, and this podcast is an extension to my Flippin' and Vibin' brand where vibers seek to transform narratives in society, education, sport, and a variety of other sectors. Today, it's our collaborative practice series where we have our storytelling viber named Richard with us today. Richard, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. The sun is shining in the north of England, so that's all good.
I know, I wonder how long it's going to be shining because sometimes the weather app is tricky when it comes to England for sure. But yeah, that's good that the weather is shining. Now, Richard O'Neill, MBE, is an award-winning storyteller, award-winning author, and cultural ambassador. Born into a traditional nomadic Romani family and raised across the north of England, Richard brings powerful stories rooted in heritage and community to life in books, plays, and songs that inspire audiences across the world, blending humor, wisdom, and heart. Working nationally and internationally as a storyteller, author, and cultural ambassador, championing the power of story to drive positive change, collaborating with communities, businesses, educators, and local authorities to inspire learning, inclusion, enterprise, and social impact. With honors including an MBE for services to education and literature, National Literacy Hero, and a Doctorate of Letters, Richard's work champions real inclusion through the timeless art of storytelling. Now, it's going to be a great episode because I know I was a part of that workshop that you did last week, and it was amazing. I mentioned you before we started that I've never been a part of a storytelling workshop before, or just been in a seminar, any type of environment where I've learned how to storytell, what that really means, and a lot of the work that you do is amazing, and it is amazing, and it'll be good today for our vibe audience to get a chance of to know who you are. So at first, we're going to start with our vibing questions. That's more around just for us to vibe with each other and allow listeners to get an idea of, say, your background and personal interests. Right. So for the audience, like, what is your background, Richard? Tell us a bit about yourself, your birthplace, family, friends, etc.
Yeah, well, my birthplace was a little town called Peterlee, which is a new town in the north of England. And I was born there, but I only stayed there for 2 weeks because I was born in a caravan. We lived in caravans at that time, modern caravans or trailers, as we would call them, and Americans would call them. And then we moved to the traditional stopping places around the northeast of England. That went on for quite a while. And then when I got a bit older, I went to school. And I was 5 years old when I went to school, and we were living in a house part-time by then. And my earliest memory of school was two things, really. One, how weird it was, because everything seemed to run to exact time. There was a timetable, and everything seemed to be very linear. Whereas our world, the world I'd come from, the nomadic world, was very circular. But on the upside of it was that this lovely teacher, she taught me how to write, and that was quite empowering. I'd learned to read. I taught myself to read before I went to school. I loved stories. I'd been virtually steeped in stories, so I knew how stories worked, and I knew that I loved words, and I knew that I loved stories. But seeing your own name written down in front of you by yourself, wow, that was so empowering. That was incredible. That taught me again about the power of the written word. Even at 5 years old, that struck me as being something quite incredible. I think we take for granted that these little marks we make on paper or whatever, then they are really a code that other people can read. And it's just, it was fascinating as a child who hadn't come from a sort of a background of literacy, shall we say, traditional literacy, or maybe not traditional literacy, but written down stuff. That was quite incredible to me.
Okay, you talked about, you said circular in terms of your upbringing. Could you kind of expand on that? What you mean by that?
Yeah, well, all nomads we have nomads all over the world. I mean, to give you a quick, very, very potted history of Romani people. So there are Romani people, often known as gypsy people, all over Europe, in fact, all over the world. But we came out of India about 1,000 years ago, traveled through lots of different countries, picked up loan words to the Indian languages that we had. We went into Spain in the 1500s, and we developed the national dance of Spain. So when you look at the national dance of Spain, which is the flamenco, look at the hand movements, you'll see the Hindi dance hand movements in that dance. The music also, if you listen to music, particularly from parts of, say, Rajasthan, you'll hear that. We came into England when King Henry VIII was on the throne. Because of our skin color, which was darker, because of our language, which was French, because we come from France, but we also spoke the Romani language, which is very different to any of the European languages, they mistakenly thought that we were from Egypt and called us Egyptians. Shakespeare
Oh,
knew about us, and Shakespeare called us Egyptian. In Othello, he mentions Egyptian, and then by the time we get to As You Like It, he says, fie like two gypsies on a horse. So the word gypsy has been used quite a lot, but it's a shortening of Egyptian. But we would say we are Romani people because that is originally a real name, shall we say. Some people say Romani Chal, which is a Romani person.
oh, okay. Thank you for that history. That reminds me actually as well. I don't know how you feel about this, but people who listen to me or people who are new listeners, I used to be a professional basketball player. And the first time I traveled to Europe, I played in Slovakia. Now, when I remember it was probably the first day I got there. We were going to a grocery store and we don't see so there's no history in terms of from my experience in Texas in terms of gypsies and Romanis, right? At least that I know of. But when I got to Slovakia and I was with some people, they were talking about there's those gypsies over there, and they were talking very derogatorily about them and very negatively, and I didn't really understand it. It was like just a couple of people, it was a mother and a few of her kids, and they were just minding their business really. I didn't really understand it. But do you know any of that history as well in terms of in Eastern Europe, in Slovakia? Because that was my
Yeah,
first introduction to that term. And like you said, words are
all of
powerful.
all of the Eastern European countries have high proportions of Romani people,
Mm-hmm.
which they would call Roma people there.
Mm-hmm.
And there's probably about 10 million people across Europe who speak the language. So it's a large number of people right across Europe. So, countries like Hungary and Romania and lots of other Eastern European countries have high proportions. But, they've always been, and I don't want to get too dark on this particular podcast, but, that there
That's
are
okay.
probably upwards of 500,000 Roma people who were sent to, the gas chambers during the Second World War. So, it was a huge purge on Roma people. So there's always been this discrimination. And I think for me, one of the things, I'm not outwardly trying to fight against that, because how can you? It's generational. But, all of the work that I do, I guess I'm trying to flip the script and just say, look, this is probably not what you've seen before. You haven't seen somebody from my community do this before. And I think that's one of the things I'm trying to do with all of my plays and books and all that kind of stuff. I'm not trying to shout and say, hey, look at me. I'm trying to say, look, just have a look at my work. You might, it might change your view about some parts of what you've had already. So I think, yeah, that's what I'm trying to do.
Ooh, thank you. That's powerful. And there's no darkness. It's all about, this is radical truth telling in this. So it's just about, this is what we do on this show. Now, in terms of your background, what about other things that bring you powerful, that are activities that bring you peace, love, and happiness, would you say?
I think, I don't know whether it's connected to the ADHD, which I found out I had just a few years ago, but I like movement. And it was, I was brought up, they used to say, you were born with wheels on your feet if you were a Romani person. So movement. So I love to walk. I don't like sitting down for too long. So I love to walk, and I love to be able to have a look at things, what appear to be ordinary things at first, but actually usually turn out to be extraordinary. I like cycling, not competitively, but I've always loved the freedom of a push bike, of a pedal bike. That's one of my things. Spending time with my children when they were younger, but now my grandchildren, for me, because I think children have a completely different view on the world. It's a beautiful view on the world, and they actually remind you what it means to be human.
Mm-hmm.
Read. I like to watch the occasional film. I like to sing. You know, one of my passions is to sing, and especially when you're singing along with other people. We created this thing a few years ago called the Gypsy Jam, and we get together maybe every 6 months, might be even a year. There are Romani, Gypsy, traveller musicians, and then we come together with other people from different communities, and we put this whole thing together, and it's just joyful. You know, you get all these different people from different backgrounds, and we come together and we just sing and play music, and it's just, yeah, we call it the Gypsy Jam because it kind of gets all jammed together. So those things, really, people, I think, and places. I'm not really interested in material things. It's always been more about people.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And you mentioned there's two things you mentioned I want to kind of wrap your head around. You talked about ADHD. You said you just found out a few years ago. How'd you feel about that?
Well, it's one of those things that makes a lot of sense. You know, there are certain character traits that you have, or there are certain things that you do, or there might be certain things that you don't like about yourself, perhaps. And then I think, oh, that makes sense. But what I'd been fortunate enough to do by the time I got to my age was to actually develop strategies around the negative parts of the ADHD and try to channel them into much more positive things. I was very fortunate in the community that I grew up in, because not being able to sit for long, always wanting to do new things, always wanting to go to new places, brain going at 200 miles an hour, and then just wanting to sit down for a bit. That was actually no problem in my nomadic community, because, as I said, it was circular. We worked with the seasons. If it was raining and you were working outside, you just sat there and did something else. So I can easily flip from one thing to the other. But if when the rain stopped, even if it was, you know, sort of way later past your what might be your designated working hours for sake of a terminology, then you did the work then. And I'll give you an example of how this fried my brain a little bit as a kid. So I'm in school, I'm 6. I'm desperate to get out to playtime, because playtime was like my sanctuary. So we had this playtime. It was at 10 o'clock till 20 past 10. Anyway, just before 10 o'clock, it starts raining. So the teacher says, right, well, just carry on doing your work. So we do our work, whatever it was we were doing. And then the rain stops about 30. And I put my hand up and I say, please, miss, can we go out and play now? And she goes, no, playtime's gone. And I'm like, how can it have gone? Time can't disappear like that, because, you know, we've done the work. And why can't we go out? Because at home, that's what we would have done. If we couldn't do something for some reason, we'd do it after that reason had passed. And that got me confused, you know, all day. I'm trying, well, how has playtime gone? Playtime has disappeared. How can it disappear? But that was the linearness of, you know, the settled community. That was the administrative way that schools work. And I think what's happened over the past few years, particularly with lots of mainstream schools in the UK, is that lots of children have been diagnosed with ADHD and lots of other things, you know, the autistic spectrum, etc. And that system is still quite linear and quite fixed. And I think that's why a lot of young people, when they go to college or university, actually fly, because it isn't as linear as, you know, elementary school or high school. And they think, wow, you know, it works in their favor.
That's a great point that you mentioned, because I know that was the case for me in terms of I did way better in university than I did pre-university. And it also resonates in terms of, I know like my sister, she has a few sons, but one of her sons in particular needs to move around as well. So she makes sure the teachers know that if he wants to move around, that he can be in the back of the classroom and walk back and forth. It's not because he's not paying attention or he's being disruptive, which is what some kids can be classified as, is because he wants to move around. It's like what you mentioned, right? Thank you for sharing that. And also, you mentioned about the community here in terms of gypsy jams, right? Is that called it right?
Gypsy Jam. Yeah, we just called it Gypsy Jam. It was the thing that we created. Yeah.
How big is the community out here in the northeast of England, or in the north of England?
Well, that's a really interesting point, because if you looked at in terms of diversity, it might still be the largest ethnic minority group in the northeast of England. It's the largest ethnic minority group in lots of parts of the UK. So if you go to Northumberland, it is. If you go across to Cheshire, it is. There's, if you look at the official figures for how many Gypsy Romani people there are in England, it's like around about 300,000-400,000. But when you actually understand the community and you know how many there are in every village, every town, every city around the whole of the UK, we're probably way over 1 million. So it's quite a large community, but it's a community that's never really been as visible. People say, oh, look, there are some caravans in the summertime, or there's a Appleby horse fair or whatever. But, there are so many hundreds of thousands of Gypsy traveller people who, live in houses, have businesses, go to work, all that kind of thing. And you wouldn't know about them because they're not as visible as the others, shall we say.
Yeah, and that reminds me of like the research that I do, because there's something I never really sat well with me in terms of when we do statistics in education, when we're talking about like attainment and the grade disparities. Gypsy and Roma was always, is that the right term? Because I know there's different political terms. Gypsy and Roma would always be one of the lowest, but because it made up such a small number, we wouldn't really count it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And it's like we are excluding a proportion of people, right? And it's like, what are we doing to support this community? So that's something I didn't really appreciate. I didn't really understand it, but I guess that's how it works in terms of academia when it comes to numbers, right? And sometimes the objectivity needs to be more subjective in certain instances, right?
Yeah. I mean, what you'll also find as well, and this is about flipping the script, I think, we might as well talk about it now as it's come up, but one of the things that we find, if you are a problem child from any community, or the education system sees you as a problem, then you will stand out. But particularly with Roma or Irish traveller or Romani people, Gypsy people, there are lots of them who have gone through the education system and they haven't ascribed as the ethnicity they are. And they've done really well, and they've ended up in jobs that they wanted. They've ended up in university, but they haven't come out as Gypsy, Roma, or Irish traveller. So, that's where the script gets flipped negatively. What's happening now, though, of course, and obviously we have in Durham, and other northeastern universities where people are feeling brave enough, confident enough, supported enough to come out as adults and say, I am from that community. And the more people who do that, then the better it's going to be. But it's not an easy thing to do, because well, let's call it racism. Let's call it what it is. The racism towards Gypsy, Irish traveller, and Roma people is really strong. You get it a lot. I can't dwell on that too much, because otherwise it would stop me from doing all of my work. So I have to kind of put it to one side sometimes, but it's always there. And you only have to go on to social media, or if there's a TV program or something, and look at the comments, and you'll see the vitriol and the vile comments that people make. It's kind of open season, Right. But that's all they see.
And how we'll get more into that. We'll get more into that in the next. But I thank you for sharing that. But what about research interests? Like what are your interests in terms of the work that you do, the research?
Well, for me, it's about story, isn't it? So it's how far can we push story? How can I take story? Where can I take it next? Where can I take it to do some good? If story's been around forever, and it's a kind of a folk thing, so it belongs to people, and all people have got it, and you haven't had to go to university to learn it. So it's not as valuable because you haven't had to pay for it. So people don't really value it. So my job is to try and make people understand how valuable it is. You saw in the workshop how valuable it was, people just sharing a tiny story, learning some more storytelling skills, and telling that story even better, which got a better reaction, self-esteem raises, all that kind of stuff. So, I've taken story into so many different places, but I want to take it. I mean, in Durham University, so I'm professor in practice at the moment. I'm the storyteller in residence at your college, which is just mind blowing how far we've moved on from, I say,
Mm.
I've gone from caravan to campus, and
Oh,
it's taken a long time, but there I am. I'm still the kid from the caravan, but, we're doing good stuff now. But I
yes.
want to show people how, and I'd like to have, and ideally that would be with Durham, I want to have a storytelling center where we can bring everybody in and teach them storytelling skills and keep pushing the storytelling skills because, and I'll tell you why, because it is the most human form of communication we can have, because it goes from
Hmm.
heart to heart and it connects. Storytelling connects people. It actually creates futures. You want to make a pitch, you want to pitch something to somebody, a brilliant idea. How many wonderful ideas have fallen at that first hurdle of not being able to pitch it properly, not being able to get across what it is you want to do? So for me, that's my area of research, is story. How can we use it? How can we take it? How can we take it to places to do things? How can we see what the future of storytelling is? We don't even know yet. I don't I I don't have an issue with AI. I see AI as another tool. When laptops came out, you and I are talking to each other now across probably 160 miles away from each other. And I'll be talking later on to somebody from Little Rock, where we're having a meeting with people in Little Rock from Arkansas
Right.
via a laptop computer, which is just amazing. Technology is wonderful,
Hmm.
useful technology though. And I think we just have to work out which parts of AI are useful. And people say, aren't you scared of it taking your stuff? I said to somebody earlier today, absolutely no. I've had more humans nick my stuff
Uh,
than I have
mm,
AI. You
really?
know, I've had my stories taken, I've had ideas taken, I've had formats taken, I've even had posts on LinkedIn, taken and revamped and done. So you know,
Oh.
AI, bring it on. I ain't scared of no AI. I
Right.
really am not, because
I hear that.
it's people you got to watch out for, not AI. AI is a
Mm,
useful tool. Let's use it. Let's see how it can take our storytelling even further.
right. Let AI use AI. Don't let it use you. Right.
Absolutely.
And in terms of you had said, oh yes, you said you have ideas and stuff that's been taken, right? But I don't. I like this platform to sometimes show examples, right? And you had some great ones at the workshop. I don't. You had many, but I don't. I want to break it down for just one. If you can kind of share with our audience, maybe an example of how you can start a good story. Like, I know, just
Absolutely,
briefly, a few
absolutely. Because
minutes. Yes,
again, we've got to get away from that linearness. Like once
yes,
upon a time there was. Well, it's great for kids' stories or whatever, but we
right.
don't do that as humans. We start randomly. And I gave the
Mm,
example of somebody whinging, moaning, venting, healthy stuff. That's what friends are good for. You've had a terrible week at work, whatever your work is, whether you work on a building
mm,
site, you work in a uni, whatever it is, you sometimes get a terrible week. And you need to tell people about this week. So you go to the pub or you go to a cafe or something, but you do not take your laptop and show a PowerPoint and take them through your week by saying, right, okay, this is Monday. I've made a chart. I've made a graph about how I was feeling at 11 o'clock. You don't. You start by saying, oh, listen, I have had the worst week. And you really go for it. You've
right.
had the worst week ever in the world of anybody. So you put the expression into it. And then you go, oh, it all started on Monday, 10 o'clock, when you know who came in. Oh, hang on. No, it started before then because I got an email on Sunday night. And you're zigzagging
Hmm.
and you're all over the place, and people are like, yeah, this is interesting because my brain's having a workout, rather than on Monday at 10 o'clock Jeff came in, and he came in with one of those things that I have to do, which is not really my job, it's Jeff's job. And you know um children are the best at that. They are just natural storytellers, and that's why I love working with schools, and even little ones at 2 and 3, because they still are so wonderfully expressive. Their
Hmm.
eyes go, their mouths go, their faces go. And it's like, I say, if you want to be a good storyteller, you need to be a human television set. You need to be what a TV is.
Mm,
And And I've always been able to prove this with kids, that we can beat screens. Any video game you like, any screen you like, will beat it with storytelling. Not a problem.
Oh, see, I was thinking that when I was reading your bio, I was like, man, I wish I could do this in a way where Richard would teach us, you know what I'm saying, to do it. Well, I didn't do it that way. I didn't prep it for that way. But now thank you for sharing that. That's again, we'll get more into that as well later down the line. Now, what about influential people? Right? You talked about different stages of your life a bit and what you
Yeah.
do. Has there been anybody influential at different stages
There's
of your life?
loads of people who influenced me, and I think from being
Mhm.
a child, there were the storytellers with my mum and dad. These stereotypes that traditional families would be very patriarchal. Mine
Mhm.
absolutely wasn't. My mum and dad were very much equal. They both had their own little business. They wouldn't say they were self-employed or entrepreneurs back in the day. They'd just say they worked for themselves. And they both worked, and they both earned money, and I learned from them. There were so many things I learned from them, as not only just as a couple who were married and had 5 children, but also how they reacted to other people, how they
Mhm.
cared for other people, all this kind of stuff. And then I guess going through school, I always say to people that you never forget a bad teacher, and you never forget a good one. And I'd be about 12, I think 11 or 12 in high school, and just not wanting to be in high school. I was only interested really in English and woodwork, and sports, well, football, not necessarily sport in general. And all the rest of it to me seemed to be boring. But we had this English teacher, and when he was talking, it went straight into my head, and I thought, he knows how I think and feel about English. I feel, these days, people would say, I feel seen. And I did. And I thought, wow, there's somebody who gets me, how I feel, because nobody else, I thought, understood how much I cared about books, how much I cared about stories, how much I loved that, and didn't realize the ADHD was going all the time, and the stories and the music and all that sort of stuff was in there. Um, so I think influential people. And then I think, if I go all the way through my, I guess what we call a storytelling career now of over 20 odd years, it's just those people you meet on the way. And
Mhm.
it's often the small things that people say, or the small things that people do, and I say this to people all the time. Don't keep waiting for this, like on the films where they say, oh, this massive thing happened to me, I'm going on Broadway. And I'm like, listen, the things that will change your life are the little things. There will be an
Mhm.
introduction to somebody at a party who you might think is a boring person, but actually they're not, if you give them a chance. It could be an email you get from somebody, and you think, oh, shall I chase that up? It doesn't sound like that. And you chase it up, and it turns out to be a brilliant opportunity. It's always those little things, and that's what storytelling reminds us. It's always made up of the little things. So all of those people I've met along the way are far too many to tell you about. But every one of them has given me that next step up, that next move there. And then even the ones who've turned out to be not very nice, they've also taught you something. So I would always say, don't dwell too much on the people who kind of do you down or rip you off or whatever. Just think, I've learned something there, and you know for next time. But it's always the little things. I would say to people, the little things, not the so-called influential people, or who
Mhm.
might seem influential. It's the ordinary people you'll learn from.
That's thank you. That's powerful. It's like you're saying your journey or your story is a is never ending in terms
Yeah.
of who comes in and who comes out, who you meet along the way, right? Oh, thank you for sharing that. Now, what about in terms of you talked a bit about people taking your ideas, but what are the most challenging moments for you, and how have you navigated them in your career?
Um, right. Okay. What's really interesting, I think, was the change from not wanting to be pigeonholed to being a gypsy storyteller. So trying to get people to understand that they say, oh, that you're the Romani storyteller, or you're the gypsy storyteller. And I would try to say, well, in my mind, actually, I'm not, because I tell stories about everything. So actually, I'm a Romani person who just, I'm a storyteller first who just happens. to come from that background. I love that background. You know, it's what made me. I wouldn't swap my background for anything in the world, but it doesn't totally define me. And I think that's what story should show us, that you don't have to be defined by where you come from. You can use it as a springboard, which I do, and I love it. You know, what I learned as a kid growing up is I couldn't learn it anywhere else. I wouldn't be here. But I've learned so many other things as well. So I'm not just that. And I think, you know, that linear way of thinking, or that blinkered way of thinking, is what I'm trying to get across with story, to say you are, you know, multiple things. You're not just one thing. Whether you had a good upbringing, you know, whatever that means, or you had a bad one, it doesn't define you.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know. So I mean, for me, that's that's the answer I'd give to that.
Thank you. As speaking about like identity and how we see ourselves, right? We're people first, and then everything else comes with that, depending on how we view ourselves. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing your background. We've done a little bit of this second part, but now we're going to get into the show. You know, we're going to get into your work and how you flip the script to traditional narratives within it. So I've had a chance to be involved in one of your workshops, but much of your work is around empowering people's experiences through storytelling and utilizing voice as well, and other things. So for our vibe audience and us too, let's attempt to flip the storytelling script, shall we? Now, what are your perceptions of traditional or normative narratives in your work?
Well, I think when it comes to story, when it comes to books, and if you look at particularly children's books, they're traditionally written by people who had access to education. So they were able to have the time to write those books. So they often come from a particular background, a background of privilege. So we actually get that script. You know, we tend to write about what we know about. Whereas I think also with storytelling, we have this fixed view where if you say storyteller, they think somebody's going to turn up who looks a little bit like Gandalf. And, you know, it's all going to be, and this is true. I went to do some storytelling at school, and it was sponsored by an organization, and the chap who was part of the organization came along. Lovely man, and he had this big white beard, and when he went into school, they immediately thought he was the storyteller and not I, because again, that's the stereotype. And the thing for me is, when I grew up with storytelling, it was always about the past, the present, and the future all together. You know, in the Romani language, we call it trin ora, which translates as 3 time. These 3 times all go in at once.
Okay.
And whereas what I find with a lot of storytelling is that it's always about the past. And for a lot of children, it's not that interesting. But when I talk to children about the past, the present, and the future in stories, it becomes much more interesting. So for me, what I'm trying to do in terms of storytelling is flip the script. In terms of having something that it means something to you now. Often with children, I'll say, right, okay, put your hand up if you've got a weird neighbor. Oh, lots of hands go up because everybody's got a weird neighbor, right? Then I say, put your hand up if you're the weird neighbor, and a few hands will go up as well. You know, and we're talking about, in my stories, I can go from, you know, 200, 300, 400 years ago right up to the present day, and I can mix them all together. And I'll give you an example of and children don't question this because they know it's fun. So I'll give you an example of a story I created, which was based in the northwest of England, in Lancashire, where they had a lot of cotton mills. So they had these big cotton mills, and the people who owned them were very rich. And a bit like the coal mines in the northeast of England, the person who owned the cotton mill was mega rich. I mean, like oligarchs of the day. And they built mansions, and they built whole towns where the workers worked. And the workers worked in the cotton mill. The cotton mill owner owned the houses, rented them back to the workers, even owned the shop. So they got the money for the, you know, so that's like crazy. But So I wanted to create this story, I guess almost like a Dick Whittington type story, which there have been, if anybody's not familiar with a Dick Whittington story, it's about a man who has this cat, a boy who has this cat. London is overrun with vermin. The cat gets rid of all the vermin. He gets loads of money, becomes the Lord Mayor of London. So there's that lovely sort of hero's journey, rags to riches, all that kind of stuff. So I created this story about cotton mill, and I set it back in the 1800s and all of the stereotypical sort of mill owner and stuff. But then I brought it up to date by having this giant cat. Now, it's a giant cat. It just grows from an ordinary cat to a giant cat. And it's a rapping. It's a rapping cat. And there's a giant mouse, and they have this kind of battle in the old-fashioned mill. And the kids are like, wow. But when the kids walk past one of these old mills, which might be converted to apartments or something now, they're thinking of that story. They're thinking of the history, and they're thinking of the present, and they're thinking of the fun, but also looking at the history. It's all mixed together, but children's brains can work that out, no problem. So I think that's what I'm trying to do in terms of stories, flip the script, make the ordinary extraordinary, and mix things up. Because, if you're thinking in your brain now, if I say to you, the year 2000, you can go there probably. And if I say to you what you've just said about Eastern Europe and playing basketball, you've gone there. And I said about, are you going back to the States soon? And you can picture that. So there's three things there that are all together held in that one thought, pretty much. And I think that's what I'm trying to do with stories, to say it's multifaceted. It's our brains are incredible. They can take all of this in, and 2-3-year-old children can think of 20, 30 different things at once. And it helps us. It gives the brain a workout, particularly for older people. I do a lot of storytelling with people who have dementia, have other cognitive issues. But what we find with them is if we keep the story in the moment, they're not having, there's nothing worse if you have dementia than somebody going, oh, do you remember 1974? Oh, do you remember this? Do you remember that? Do you remember when you were at school? Look, here's this. People are thinking it's very hard work. So we do a story in the moment. And I think that's the other thing that storytelling does. See, now I'm talking a lot because I'm so passionate about storytelling.
That's good.
But it allows us to be in the moment with those people, and we're all going on a journey. So we're not just talking about, the ye olde days when this old character, this story's been told 40 million times and everybody's sick to the back teeth of it. But we're creating something new together.
Wow. And when you talk about creating something new together, and you talk about this journey of flipping the script, could you share a particular moment that you consider a turning point during your career?
Yeah, it was a phone call, and I was known for being a storyteller just in my community, and I'd probably done a little bit of voluntary work at my local school where my kids went and stuff like that, but nothing professional. And I got this phone call, and it was from an organisation in Manchester, and they said, we're looking for a storyteller. We've got this event coming up, and it's about movement and stuff, and we've got some yurts inside this place, and we thought that you would be ideal for it. And then they mentioned money, and it was quite a nice chunk of cash, and I fancied, I thought, I always say yes to stuff if I can. And I said, yes, okay, good. And then when I put the phone down, I'm like, about a minute thinking, yes, this is, oh, wow, they're going to give me, a few £100 to do this, and this is amazing. And then that reality kicked in, and I thought, what am I going to do? Oh no, what if it's like, not what they want? And like, what if it goes, oh, hang on. Anyway, I kind of got to the event and I did it. I thought I was okay. I did okay. They thought I was good. And they invited me back. And then they invited me to another place, and I ended up working, for a big museum in Manchester, and doing work for them, and then going down to London where they had another museum and teaching all of the people who met the public in the museums how to use storytelling to make people feel more relaxed and so on and so on. But it's just one phone call, and taking that opportunity. So yeah, that was a real turning point for me.
All right. And so that's why it's important to looking at, it's just one phone call just changed everything.
Yeah. And
Mm.
because people say to me, you know, so "Well, why did you become a storyteller?" And I say, I didn't. Um, I didn't sit there plotting out a storytelling career, you know, like somebody who wants to form a band and then become the biggest band in the world.
Right.
I didn't. I just enjoyed my stories. I enjoyed this. I was always doing stories. It came for me. Storytelling
Mm.
found me through that
Yes.
phone call and said, right,
Mm.
okay, this is what you're doing. And that's what I would say to a lot of people. Do your stuff, enjoy what you're doing, and you might just, it just might come and find you. It might just come a call in for you, which it came calling for me through a phone call. And when I say a phone call, I'm talking about a landline phone call. Right, this
Mm.
is over 20 years ago when most people didn't have a mobile. It was a landline. So
Landline,
with a
Yellow
cable,
Pages, Yellow
with
Pages.
yeah, yeah, exactly,
Yes.
exactly. But I wasn't even
Uh,
in Yellow Pages. They just found me by word of mouth.
but it's just but when you say that, that comes to my mind, like the
Yeah,
landline. You know what I mean? So it's like you just
yeah,
mentioned
yeah,
earlier about how different things can come in our mind
yeah,
when we talk about
yeah,
certain, sure, symbols. Wow. See, we learn. So, like you said, everything, there's so many different things when we talk about these things.
exactly.
Now you've already mentioned obviously about flipping the script, but how else is your research or your activism and what you do? Because I see you're someone who's active um, in the community and in education, right? So how are you flipping the script specifically?
Right, good question. I think I'm flipping the script by everything that I do every day, every
Mm-hmm.
every post I put on LinkedIn. Everything I do, I'm trying to flip the script, but I'm not trying to wag the finger and say, "Hey, listen, you ought to do this because I know more than you. Especially if you're young, you ought to do what I say because I'm old and got grey hair."
Right.
I'm just putting my stuff out there and asking people to have a look at it and hopefully wrapping it up in stories so it is a bit more appealing. Um, and that brings me to the age thing, okay? Because we have this, there are two groups, I think, who the media don't like or they're easy to have a go at. Old people because they're rude and they're a burden on society and they're
Mm-hmm.
horrible. And young people who are just rude, obnoxious, violent, dangerous, and a burden on society. And if we could just get rid of them two, everything would be fine. Absolute rubbish. It's a great little hook for the media to constantly talk about. And everybody will have a story of one person, one older person who's been a pain, one younger person who's been a pain. But actually, the vast majority of older people and younger people, and that's what I'm trying to do as well by flipping the script on that, by trying to bring children and older people together so that they actually can see. And I'll give you a little story, which we've got a project going at the moment down in South Yorkshire, and we have a 10 children from a primary school, and they're 4 and 5 years old, so they would be in what we call reception class. They'll be in year 1 when they go back after September. Anyway, we have got a match for every one of those children in a local care home, and the older people, their age ranges from in their late 70s to the oldest person is 99 years old. And we're doing this project. We've got some wooden dolls that move, what I think in the US you'd call them lumberjacks. Over here we would call them dancing dolls.
Okay.
Now we've got these group of people and we put them together for the first time, 4 and 5-year-old children with these older people in the care home. And you know what was the amazing thing about them? Now I'm talking about one child is 4 years old. She gets partnered with this man who's 99. To try and work out the age gap between that.
Mm.
Yeah. 95 years by my maths.
Yes, that's what
She is Black African, right? So her parents are from Africa. I think she's born in Africa, but she's come to England as a baby. She's got this beautiful hair with the beads in and everything. The chap is a white British man who's been in England since he was born 99 years ago. So they're from very different backgrounds. They're very different ages.
Mm.
Do they get on with each other? Absolutely. She takes charge of the situation. He's got bad hands. He can't draw. They've been asked to draw each other. That's the first thing. People are asking. We've asked the old people to draw the young people and the young people to draw. She works out at 4, going on 5, that he has a bit of an issue with his hands. She works it out with him. She does his drawing for him as well. No fuss, no messing about, no complaining. 4, going on 5, does the drawing for him. And I looked at this and I saw how these people were getting on, because some people thought, well, we might have to really interact and, oh, you know, you have to do this. No, they were fine. But you know what it was? It was because they both accepted each other where they were. The older person wasn't expecting this 4-year-old to be brilliant at writing or drawing or anything. And the 4-year-olds weren't expecting these older people. And I think sometimes our expectations of each other are way too high. And we're seeing each other, you know, wrongly. Whereas these young people, these tiny, were babies, you know, 3 years before that, they were babies. They're actually, you know, interacting with these older people. And some of them have dementia and they're absolutely not questioning anything. They're just seeing that person as they are at that moment and taking them at face value. And they're meeting each other exactly where they are now. And it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. So when we talk about older people and younger people, what comes out of those relationships is beautiful, is fantastic. It's actually, that's part of my research, to actually show people that actually, you know, if we get rid of a lot of the stuff that you think makes you clever and you just meet a person where they are, you actually learn a lot and do a lot. It's beautiful.
Thank you. That's probably meet people where they are. Yeah, because it makes me think about, like, when we talk about activism, and many of us activists tend to, people who are active in the community tend to want people to be where they are, right? In terms of ideas, in terms of social inequalities, but that's just not how it works, is it? And it's important to be a storyteller or someone who is, like you said, someone who's in the community trying to empower other people or trying to create equity or equality and fight for justice. It's important for us to, like you said, meet people where they're at, and not, and like you said, the script is evolving, isn't it? And
it is, and I think what we ought to be doing, you know, because we tend to have, you know, I don't like the word activist particularly, you know, because it kind of, you know, the connotations of that. I'm a campaigner. I've been a campaigner all my life. I created National Men's Health Week because I was campaigning for better health coverage for men. And so I don't think I've ever campaigned against anything in my life. I think I've always campaigned for. I want to campaign for this. I want to campaign for, so, because I think if you're campaigning against things, it's quite negative. That's just my own personal view. And when it comes to community work, what I'm trying to do with storytelling is build a bridge. I'm trying to build a bridge with words. And the idea is that actually, just like you saw in the workshop last week, we built a bridge with words, and then we all crossed that bridge and we stood in the middle and we enjoyed the view from both sides. And that's what we did. You're creating something, you're creating a bridge where we both, you know, bridges people think are to cross from one side to the other, and they absolutely are. But there's something beautiful about standing in the middle of a bridge with someone from the other side, because then you get a 360 view of their world and your world. And that for me is rather beautiful. And I think there's a reason why, even though people laughed at it, I think there's a reason why people put those padlocks on bridges when it was happening. Because I think you stand in the middle of a bridge, you're in a different place. You're in a beautiful in-between place.
I like this. So when you talk about beautiful in-between place, would that be considered the place that we consider uncomfortable? Is that, or?
I think some people might see that as uncomfortable. But I think some people, most people, will see it as comfortable. You know, if I'm working in a community center, or I'm working wherever I'm working in a business or anything, if we can create that space, and through our stories and through our words, we can actually get people to climb across and stand in the middle, in a safe space in the middle, I think we've cracked it. I think we've really cracked it. You know, and I can remember being at a community event where it was ready to kick off between two different groups. One group wanted one thing, the other group wanted another, and it was in a city. And we were in an old church building that had been converted into a big community center. And the person who was in charge of the community center was very concerned and thought that bricks were going to come through the window because the people on the outside weren't happy with what was going on the inside. And I said, listen, it's not going to happen, right? It's not going to happen. Give me 20 minutes, give me 10 minutes with these people, because I want to tell them a story. And I think they'll get a different view. And they did, and it was fine. You know, and there was no bricks going through the windows, thankfully. but you know, what we're trying to do with stories sometimes is not tell people a story. It's to give them a story and let them think about it. And I think that's, you know, so I'm probably I could be a story giver, a story sharer, you know, rather than a storyteller. So I think, yeah, that's what I'm trying to do with storytelling, is to do it in a different way, even to what I was taught growing up, because, you know, I learned it one way, and I learned from some of the best storytellers in the world. But my journey has taken me to so many different places and so many different influences, and my research, you know, live research with people has made me think and made me change and made me improve and moved me this way and that. But the fundamental is the fact that storytelling, whatever it is, I mean, it's like, I guess storytelling is like love. You know, you try and explain love. It's it's chemicals in it, and it's this, but it's more than chemicals. Storytelling is chemicals. You know, it increases dopamine, it does all of this kind of stuff, but it does more than that. There's something that you just can't put your finger on what it is, and it's the same with love. So I think that's the wonderful thing. That's what keeps me interested in it, because, you know, how far can we take it? What can it do next? You know, how can it bring people together? How can it help this? How can it heal that? How can it do that? That's the question I keep asking myself. That's why I keep going.
Man, you're dropping bombs today. You're dropping nice. But to add on to that, then, so where do you see yourself or your work leaving some form of lasting legacy, or just positively impacting people?
Yeah, I think that's why we need the Storytelling Centre. You know, I want to create a storytelling centre in a university in the Northeast, particularly, so that, you know, all of these stories that I've created, all of these things that I'm doing now, all of these things that I have done, don't just, you know, when I've gone, they're not just left. And people say, oh, do you remember that story he used to tell? I want them to be used, you know. So I had this huge body of work, this huge back catalogue of stuff that needs to be used. It's no good being on a shelf. It's no good some researcher coming along in 30 years after I've gone and going, oh, this was interesting. Look what he did. He was, 110 years ago, he was born in a caravan and he did this and he did that. And oh, that's interesting. It's no good. You know, it's no good just going to somebody's PhD or thesis or whatever. It needs to be used. You know, so that's what I want to happen. So if we have the Storytelling Centre, then we can research it, but we can do it live as well, and we can bring people in like we have done with your young people you brought in to the college last week. And share it with them and empower them and skill them up on it, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's the next thing. So you'll get fed up of me talking about that, like I did when I was campaigning for National Men's Health Week. I'd even got fed up of my own voice at one point, because I was repeating myself so much. I thought, gosh, I've said this in meetings now 30 times, but I'll have to do it again. But yeah, that's what I'll be like with the Storytelling Centre.
That sounds great. Ooh, thank you for sharing that. Now, I'm gonna take something from you. I know about standing still. I'm gonna get up for a second, stretch it out. I don't know if you can too, if you're already standing, but just to move a bit. Now we're at the last two questions, last part of the show is about we're gonna talk about rehumanization. You're gonna offer us insight around that, right? So, if you could reflect on your journey thus far, what do you know now that you wish you knew before?
That's a really good question, and I'm going to answer it this way because I've thought about this before. I wouldn't want to know any more than I knew, because not that ignorance is bliss, but actually a certain ignorance makes you want to learn more. So every little twist and turn, everything I've got wrong, everything I've had to learn on the fly, everything I've had to learn quickly or over a longer period has got me to where I am now. And I don't want to be anywhere else than where I am now. Changing anything very slightly would have me somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
I would not change a thing. So saying, oh, I wish I knew that then. Well, if I knew something back 20 years ago, 15 years ago, I'd be in a different place. I could be in a really bad place now. Who knows? I've paid my dues, as they say. But every one of them has been worth it.
Thank you. It makes me think about a conversation my partner and I had yesterday, or a comment she made about, I wonder what would happen if we met each other 15 years ago, right? It's like what you said, like we may not stay together, right? Or we may, you know what I mean? We were in different parts of our journey, right? So, thank you for sharing that. Thank
Because
you for being. Oh,
I
go
think
ahead.
that's a Western thing, and I think
Mm,
that's almost a consumer thing, and it's
mm-hmm,
almost a thing to spread seeds of doubt in a way. What if?
mm,
What if? No. What if we just focus on the now, right?
exactly.
Because now is the only thing we've got, right? It might be interesting to think about what might have happened, but that's for writers like me, and that's for films to deal with. Yeah, you can go and
Right.
watch that, but
Right.
live the now, live the now. That's where everything's happening.
I definitely agree with that. You mentioned, wait, what was the term you mentioned that y'all was it trend? Is you said the
Print
past
aura, which is
trend
three times.
trend aura 3 time. Okay, I love that. Love that. Okay. Wow. Now, thank you. We talked a lot about some of your background and the work you do. It's amazing in terms of just rewriting our own story, understanding that stories are never ending
Hmm.
as well. Your journey is never ending, and it's important to be with somebody in terms of sitting with and accepting where someone is at. You mentioned about being not necessarily an activist, but a campaigner. That's something new I've heard. I really love that because I know people don't. Not everyone likes the term activist, but I do like campaigners. Well, then you even change storyteller to story gatherer, story. So we've spoken a lot about just storytelling specifically and just your background and what you do. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
But now we're to the last question. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So, what does rehumanization look like to you?
To me, it means that we get rid of a lot of our dependence on digitization. Digitization has been great, it's wonderful, but what I've always thought about digital stuff, when mobile phones came out, I wanted one, because it made my life easier. Nomadic people have always taken useful technology and integrated it. And for me, that's what we ought to be. With digitization, we should just integrate what's useful, not spend all our lives on it. So we need to look again at digitization and think, right, okay, we've got to think about a lot of this stuff as either useful tools that we're using or gadgets. And you've got to make a choice. Get rid of the gadgets and stick with the useful tools. And then we've got to make space and time for us to get back together again, like we did at your college last week. We had a whole group of people there. We had a session, and all the sessions were great. But in my session, we had an hour and a half. Nobody looked at their watch once, because we were all just in that present moment. And I think if we can share our humanness and the joy in that, that's how we get back to it. That's how we get by creating these spaces where it can happen. And you created a space last week where that happened. So more people like you creating more spaces so people like me can be involved in it. And then that we're not rehumanizing. I think what we're actually doing is we're currently humanizing. You know, those young people came full of humanization. They just had an opportunity to share it. And the fun and the laughter was off the scale, you know. And that story that we had with that one particular young man who was just the most beautiful human. You know, if you wanted to see humanity, it was there. He took a joke against himself. He told a story which showed him, you know, in a funny light, and he shared it from his heart to everybody. And it was just the funniest, most beautiful, wonderful thing. That's the model. That young man who was probably 16, maybe less, even 16 or 17, perhaps 15, 16, 17, wasn't sure. That's it right there in that bit. And I think there was some videos taken on the day of some of that stuff happening. So, you know, look at that video and there's your humanization, not rehumanization, but celebrating the humanization we already have and creating spaces for more of it.
Amazing meaning, because so basically it's about integrating, how we can integrate the new through currently humanizing in collaboration with others.
Yes,
something around those lines.
Because otherwise we will constantly be looking, as you know, me as an older person, you as not an older person, but we will constantly be thinking that we have to, you know, do something to other people to make them more human, where actually what we should do is sitting down with them and allowing some of them to show us how to be more human. You know, that young man and the other people there on that day showed us some fantastic humanization, some humanness. They showed us, you know, I'm old. They showed me something new. Right. And that was just fantastic. But that was that meeting on that bridge. I did my stuff, they did theirs, and together we just had the best time. And we both went away learning stuff. You know, I'm still talking about that event, which was last week, and I've done quite a few things since then. And I know they were still talking about it the next day, as I was. So, you know, that's powerful humanness right there in that room.
Thank you. It's amazing. So it's been amazing talk. I know we've stretched it a bit, but we're good. I really do appreciate you coming on today.
My pleasure.
Is there any social media handles or platforms that people can follow you on?
If they just type my name in on LinkedIn, that's probably the place where I post the most now. There's all sorts of different stuff I post on there, and articles I will write and put on there as well. So yeah, LinkedIn would be the best place to go, definitely.
Okay, thank you. And now that makes me think about like the role that you play. I guess everyone wants to be, I mean, it would be good to be in a role that we are happy with and we enjoy doing, right? Whatever our job is. But it seems like if it's never ending, if storytelling is never ending, is like, is there ever a retirement stage?
No.
Right.
No. Not in my psyche, not in my, I mean, what am I going to do? Play golf? I mean, what am I going to do?
Yes, that's how it feels. Yeah, that's how it feels as an educator too.
Right. I'm going to have to pay money to go on holidays or experiences to give me something to do. What's the point of that? No chance. No.
That's a good point.
God, no. God, no. No, not for me.
Okay.
Not for me. I'm just getting started, you know. I'm just getting started.
Oh, that's good. Yes. Wow. Okay. Well, yeah. Well, thank you for tuning in, and yeah, I appreciate you. Just taking the time out and having us all, giving us all an opportunity to learn what you do, the impact of storytelling, and just how we can understand our history, understand the present for a better future, right? For an
Yeah,
empowering future, right?
definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and a co-created future, one
Ah,
that benefits as many people as possible, not just a few.
absolutely. Okay.
Well,
Um,
you have a safe journey, because I know you're gonna do some traveling soon. So, um,
yes.
safe travels.
Thank you very much. I'll stay in contact with you. But
Definitely.
yeah, I appreciate
I'll
you.
I'll
I'll let you
I'll
get
see you
on.
when you come back,
Oh, for sure, for sure.
and we will do some more stories. We'll do some more storytelling.
Absolutely, I definitely need that. I'm gonna tell you a story that's never gonna go away from me, ever gonna go away. I love that for sure. I love that, man. And then also, the one other message I did and that did resonate with me when someone mentioned that they didn't like their voice,
Oh,
and
well, yeah, I brought that up straight away, because I say how many people like their voice, and nobody does generally.
yes,
Um,
most of us don't.
there's just something strange, isn't there, about that? I mean, I guess somebody's probably done some research on that, or maybe they will. But
Hmm.
it's just strange, and and I was the same. I didn't like my voice when I heard it
Me
recorded
too.
the first time, and everybody's the same. But you have to get past that, because actually our voice is beautiful. Every voice is beautiful. It's individual. It's a gorgeous, as one of my friends says about being a musician, he's a very talented multi-instrumentalist, and he says, actually, but voice is still the best instrument of all. It can do things that no musical instrument can do. So that we've got to try and remember what a wonderful thing we've been given, if we have been given a voice.
That's a great point because even when I started this show, I was thinking like, because I'm more of a listener and observer. I used to be really shy growing up. I talk a bit more now, but I've been more of a listener and an observer. And I was always thinking like, I'm gonna feel about listening back over to my voice. I didn't really I didn't really want to do that, but I've kind of grown accustomed to that. But that message there definitely resonated with me, and I'm sure it will with others. All right, I'll let you go. But I appreciate you.
My pleasure, really.
I'll see you later. Okay.
Definitely. You take care. Safe travels. All the
All right, you
best.
too. Bye.
Bye.
Amazing episode. Thank you, Richard, for joining and just sharing with us your background and just what it means to be a storyteller. We're all storytellers in a way, right? In that our journey is a story and it's never ending. And I really enjoyed the definition or what rehumanization means to you specifically because I think he's one of the first ones who's mentioned this idea of humanization. I think some other vibers have as well. Maybe it was Soul, but in terms of currently humanizing is important, right? It's about sitting with humanization, and that is in co-creation, that is collaboration, it's being in a community, in a communal environment, in a safe space where we can uh, sit with other people where they're at and engage in dialogue within that. Yes, but thank you for sharing your background and just allowing listeners to and our vibers to have a different perspective in terms of how we tell stories and how we can move in our life, right? It's for everybody, isn't it? And, yeah, if you are listening, you made this far, thank you for tuning in. Yeah, and thank you for vibing uh, with us. Yeah, I appreciate you. Love thyself, love others around you, and keep humanizing, keep rehumanizing. Like I said, we got some ways to go, but I'm excited where this podcast is going. I'm sorry where this brand is going, but please continue to support, like, share, and subscribe. But yeah, until then, one love.